So I was scrolling X and I've seen some posts of other people who were talking about their startups and how good they are, how complex they are, and I mean being complex is not really a factor of becoming a successful startup. But yeah, they were big things and feel like they are hard to do, right? And then I look at my own thing that I'm doing. I compare them, I get depressed, and I get jealous because I couldn't do shit. Then suddenly, there is a thought that I got, and what happened is that if everybody is not doing better than you, or if everybody is doing less better than you, how will you live? How can you expect the world to be a better place if everybody is actually not working as good as you or more better? So yes guys, don't fucking get jealous, don't compare yourself, okay? World wouldn't be a good place if these people weren't better than you. You just have to be working on yourself to get to their level instead, right? There's no use if you are constantly beating up yourself for being less intelligent or less successful than the other people, because effectively you got your whole life and you can take a step, or your life might turn around at any point, right? So that's it. Just wait for the right moment and keep working at it all the time, right? And never get jealous about them. Just feel proud that you are living in the same world as they are, right? They are at least doing something important. They are working hard, unlike other people who are just earning by shit posting on Instagram or social media. These are people who provide value to the society and make the humanity grow. Alright, let's get back to our session. And today we are gonna have some interesting essays to be read. So where were we last day? I read small articles, right? I had exams, so I had to go in 1 hour. Maybe today I'll try to read a bigger one. We were at 88th page, right? 88th page. Alright. Constable 1983 Cambridge. Okay, this is alright. Scroll. Okay, this is it. Earnestness. This one is done as well. Billionaires Build. This feels like something I've talked about just a minute ago. Right? So, Billionaires Build. December 2020. As I was deciding to write about next, I was surprised to find that two separate essays I had been planning to write were actually the same. The first is about how to ace Y Combinator interview, and there has been so much nonsense written about this topic that I have been meaning for years to write something telling founders the truth. The second is about politicians. Politicians sometimes say that the only way to become a billionaire is by exploiting people, and why this is mistaken. Okay. Keep reading and you'll learn both simultaneously. I know that politicians are mistaken because it was my job to predict which people will become billionaires. I think I can truthfully say that I know as much about how to do this as anyone. If key to becoming a billionaire, the defining failure of billionaires was to exploit people, then I, as a professional billionaire scout, would would surely realize this and look for people who would be good at it, just as an NFL scout looks for the speed in wide receivers. But aptitude for exploiting people is not Y Combinator looks for at all. In fact, it's the opposite of what they look for. I'll tell you what they look for by explaining how to convince Y Combinator to fund you, and you can see for yourself. What YC looks for above all is founders who understand some group of users and can make what they want. This is so important that it's YC's motto. Make something people want. A big company can, to some extent, force unsuitable products on unwilling customers. But a startup doesn't have the power to do that. A startup must sing for its supper by making things that genuinely delight customers, otherwise, it will never get off the ground. Here's where things get difficult. Both for you and the founder, and for the YC partners trying to decide whether to fund you in the market economy, it's hard to make something people want that they don't already have. That's a great thing about market economics. If other people both knew about this need and were able to satisfy it, they already would be. But there would be no room for your startup. Which means the conversation during the YC interview will have to be about something new. Either a new need or a new way to satisfy one, or just a new but uncertain. And not just new but uncertain. If it were certain that the need existed and you could satisfy it, that certainly would be reflected in large and rapidly growing revenues. And you wouldn't be seeking seed funding. So the YC partners have to guess both whether you've discovered a real need and whether you will be able to satisfy it. That's why they are, at least in this part of the job, professional guessers. They have 1001 heuristics for doing this. I'm not going to tell you all of them, but I'm happy to tell you the most important ones, because these can't be faked. The only way to hack them would be to do what you should be doing there anyway as a founder. The first thing the partners will try to figure out usually is whether what you're making will ever be something a lot of people want. It doesn't have to be something a lot of people want now. The product and the market will both evolve and will influence each other's evolution. But in the end, there has to be something with a huge market. That's what the partners will be trying to figure out. Is there a path to a huge market? Market. Anyway, sometimes it's obvious there will be a huge market. If Boone manages to ship an airliner at all, international airlines will have to buy it. But usually it's not obvious. Usually the path to a huge market is by growing a small market. This idea is important enough that it's worth coining in a phrase for. So let's call one of these small but growable markets a larval market. The perfect example for a larval market might be Apple's market when they were founded in 1976. In 1976, not many people wanted their own computer, but more and more started to want one. Till now, every 10-year-old on the planet wants a computer, but it calls it a phone. Cool, yeah. Phones are computers. Very right. The ideal combination is the group of founders who are living in the future in the sense of being at the leading edge of some kind of change and who are building something they themselves want. Most super successful startups are of this type. Steve Wozniak wanted a computer. Mark Zuckerberg wanted to engage online with his college friends. Larry and Sergey wanted to find things on the web. All these founders were building things they and their peers wanted, and the fact that they were at the leading edge of the change meant that more people want to use these things in the future. But although The ideal level market is oneself and one's peers. That's not the only kind. A level market might also be regional. For example, you build something to serve one location and then expand to others. The crucial feature of the initial market is that it exists. That may seem like an obvious point, but the lack of it is the biggest flaw in most startup ideas. There have to be some people who want what you're building right now and want it so urgently that they are willing to use it. Bugs and all, even though you're a small company they've never heard of. There don't have to be many, but here have to be some. As long as you have some users, there are straightforward ways to get more. Build new features they want, seek out more people like them, get them to refer to you, their friends, and so on. But these techniques all require some initial seed group of users. So this is one thing users YC partners will almost dig into during your interview. Who are your first users going to be? How do you know they want this? If I had to decide whether to fund startups based on a single question, it would be, how do you know people want this? How do you know people want this? The most convincing answer is because we and our friends want it. It's even better when this is followed by the news that you have already built a prototype, and even though it's very crude, your friends are using it and it's spreading by word of mouth. If you can say that, you're not lying. The partners will switch from default no to default yes, meaning you're in unless there is some more disqualifying flaw. That is hard standard to meet. Though Airbnb didn't meet it, they had the first part. They had made something by themselves wanted, but it wasn't spreading. So don't feel bad if you don't hit the gold standard of convincingness. If Airbnb didn't hit it, it must be too high. In practice, the YC partners will be satisfied if they feel that you have a deep understanding of your users' needs, and the Airbnbs did have that. They were able to tell us all about what motivated hosts and guests. They knew from the first hand experience because they had been the first hosts. We couldn't ask them a question they didn't know the answer to. We ourselves were not very excited about the idea as users, but we know this didn't prove anything because there were lots of successful startups that we hadn't been excited about as users. We were able to say that to ourselves. They seem to know what they are talking about. Maybe they are onto something. It's not growing yet, but maybe they can figure out how to make it grow during YC, which they did about 3 weeks into the patch. Best thing you can do in YC interview is to teach the partners about your users. If you want to prepare your interview, one of the best ways to do it is to go to your users and find out what exactly they are thinking, which is what you should be doing anyway. This may sound strangely credulous, but the YC partners want to rely on the founders to tell them about the market. Think about how VCs typically judge the potential market for an idea. They're not ordinary domain experts themselves, so they forward the idea to someone who is and ask for their opinion. YC doesn't have time to do this, but if the YC partners can convince themselves that founders both know what they're talking about and aren't lying, they don't need outside domain experts. They can use the founders themselves as domain experts when evaluating their own idea. This is why YC interviews aren't pitches. To give as many founders as possible a chance to get funded, we made interviews as short as we could. 10 minutes. That is not enough time for the partners to figure out through the indirect evidence in the page whether you know what you're talking about and aren't lying. They need to dig in and ask you questions. That's not enough time for sequential access. They need random access. The The worst advice I ever heard about how to succeed in a YC interview is that you should take control of the interview and make sure to deliver the message you want to. In other words, turn the interview into a pitch. Elaborate, expletive. It is so annoying when people try to do that. You ask them a question and instead of answering it, they deliver some obviously prefabricated blob of pitch. It eats up 10 minutes really fast. There is no one who can give you accurate advice about what to do in a YC interview except a current or former YC partner. People who merely been interviewed, even successfully, have no idea of this. But interviews take all sort of different forms depending on what the partners want to know about the most. Sometimes they're all about founders, other times they're all about the idea, sometimes a very narrow aspect of the idea. Founders sometimes walk away from the interviews complaining that they didn't get to explain their idea completely. True, but they explained enough. If a YC interview consists of questions, the way to do it well is to answer them well. Part of that is answering them candidly. The partners don't expect you to know everything, but if you don't know the answer to a question, don't try to bullshit your way out of it. The partners, like most experienced investors, are professional bullshit detectors, and you are hopefully an amateur bullshitter. And if you try to bullshit them and fail, they may not even tell you that you failed, so it's better to be honest than to try to sell them. If you don't know the answer to a question, say you don't. Tell them how do you go about finding it, or tell them the answer to some related question. If you're asked about, for example, what could go wrong, the worst possible answer is nothing. Instead of convincing them that your idea is bulletproof, this will convince them that you are a fool or liar. Far better to go into gruesome detail. That's what experts do when you ask what could go wrong. The partners know that your idea is risky. That's what a good bet looks like at this stage. A tiny probability of a huge outcome. Ditto if they ask you about competitors are rarely what kills startups. Poor execution does. But you should know who your competitors are, and tell the YC partners candidly what your relative strengths and weaknesses are. Because the YC partners know that competitors don't kill startups, they won't hold competitors against you too much. They will, however, hold it against you if you seem either to be unaware of the competitors or to be minimizing the threat they pose. They may not be sure whether you're clueless or lying. They don't need to be. The partners don't expect your idea to be perfect. This is seed investing. At this stage, all they can expect is promising hypothesis. But they do expect you to be thoughtful and honest. If trying to make your idea seem perfect causes you to come off as a glib or clueless, you sacrifice something you needed for something you didn't. Alright, we need to just go back and see what we have learned, right? The first thing is he's talking about how to ace an Y Combinator interview. He compared it with the politicians who were mistaken because they will predict. Who were mistaken because they said that. Okay. Alright. Sorry. Billionaires. So, to become a billionaire, you need to exploit people. That's what politicians believe. But it's not the same for professional billionaires, right? People who became billionaires through their profession. And that's what this guy is. Paul Graham. He's got a $2.5 billion net worth. So, let's go ahead and see what he says. Make something people want. So, page. Okay, I didn't ask you anything. Get out of here. So a big company can do make something, but people want. Obvious. This is the basic thing about any business, any startup, right? Make something people want. And there is also a saying by Henry Ford that if I ask what people wanted, they would say faster horses. So it's not that extreme, but you should be making something that people would want, right? Not they actually what they actually want already. They don't know what they want. So if you know what they want, just make it, right? You should know what they want, not them. Maybe that's what I can infer from it. So a big company can solve some extent by using unsuitable products. We can to some extent force unsuitable product and unsuitable customers. True, because they got huge network, right? Huge distribution network, and they have also got monopoly. So marketing budgets, they can literally change the mindset of users, literally influence everything. They have enough data, enough money to put into. They can do anything they want if they want to. But a startup doesn't have the power to do that. They must sing for its supper by making things that genuinely delight its customers. Otherwise, it will never get off the ground. And this will get into our Twitter. But before we'll write it here. Let's see. These kind of quotes really help people. See this. What is this? Bullshit shit posting. Bullshit shit posting. There's nothing you can get out of here. Nothing. Anyways. Startup community. Okay, this is so annoying. Tag Twitter. I can do that. You already said that. Doesn't matter. Let's post it. Did we post it in here? We did, I guess. I found something bigger. Where is it? There. Bro. This is just stupid. What am I doing? I need to build something which will automatically send whatever I do, whatever I post to all these things, right? Okay, we got a new project on board. Alright. Done. See, only one thing is appearing in here. Nice. The get back. So here is what things will get off both for you as a founder and YC partners trying to decide, okay, this is all learned, right? Oh my god, I need water. Give me a second, okay? All right. In a market economy, it's hard to make something that people want, right? So that's a great thing about market economics. If people both knew in a market economy, it's not to make something that people want that they don't know they already have. That's a great thing about the market economy. If other people both knew this is need, knew about this need, and were able to satisfy it, they already would be, and there would be no room for your startup. Which means your startup must be something new, either a new need or a new way to satisfy one. Which means your startup must be Okay, this goes into Twitter as well. Let me just copy this. Okay, let's just bold it. Bold. Bold. This is Apple's got really a big number of people in the community. Crazy. Design Spear. It's got 600k. More than half of developers and designers are the same, I guess. Alright. Nobody saw my fucking thing yet. Nobody. I like the fucking this UI. Very clean, not very clean, but yeah. Anyways, let's get back. So if I see partner have to guess whether you discovered a new need, a real need, or whether you will be able to satisfy it, that's the job to actually get the market, right? So it's not just about need, it's about uncertainty. Because if it was certain, then you will be already having customers and you don't need a funding, right? Not just new. So the white combinators, this is they'll be guessing a professional guesses and whatever they do. First thing to figure out is we're making ever something a lot of people want. Building what you're making. Anyway, again this one. Check whether what you're making will ever be something a lot of people want. One question to figure out. And then there is that Twitter. Nice. Okay. It's changing. Get back. Sometimes it's obvious there will be a huge market if Boom manages where to ship. Hmm. Usually the path to huge market is by growing small market. So you should have a small market first. Idea is important enough that it's worth hiring phrase for. It changed. Time has changed. My god, so much of fix. Building in public. Building in public again. People are only in public. What about others? Code. Yeah. All right. Let's get back. So ideal combination of group of founders is a group of founders who are living in the future in the sense of being leading edge of some kind of change, who are building something they themselves want. Most super successful startups are of this type. Founders should be there. It's weird.
పోయిండే అన్ని బాధలు పోయిండే దాని తర్వాత ఇదందరూ చూసిన నేను డబ్బా ఒప్పుకోవడం కాదు కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వం జలశక్తి మంత్రి స్వయంగా పార్లమెంట్ 100% ట్యాప్ కనెక్షన్స్ ఇచ్చి పోర్టబుల్ డ్రింకింగ్ వాటర్ సప్లై చేస్తున్న ఏకైక రాష్ట్రం కేవలం తెలంగాణ అని కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వం
Not. I can just post it everywhere. This is fun though. I don't have to think too much for a post. I can just read and post this at the same time. I can't leave that. Anyway, window repost. Good. Yeah, it's been 1 day, so it's not showing to many people. That's fine though. I wonder if it's still working or not. No, it's not working. I love the idea of flower market transfer fees. Okay, it's not only kind flower market can also be regional. For example, crucial feature of initial market is that it exists. That may seem obvious point, but I think we want. with me. So much of posts that could be done today. Users. Willing to use it even though you're more than they are never heard of. They don't have to be many, but there have to be some. As long as you have some users, people. Gently like this. have to give it some time. एक ही बार में इतनी ज़्यादा कुछ, so I can't post too much at the same time. Maybe they have a limit, or maybe they see my message frequency, right? Cool. That's a lot of money spent on apps. Holy shit. Consistency works. It's not automated.
Will always love you.
Terrorists again. That sucks. I'm flagged now. My post will go down. See, there is no fucking views. I'll just leave it there then. Let's just complete this, and we need to post at different times, right? Should not just directly post it. Automated this post. We just have to. Okay. I'll say enough. Because our friends wanted. So if I'm a million a month, what are you? Seriously. So in 6 months. Yeah. Wow. Awesome, man. Awesome. I don't know why this post just make me jealous instead of inspiring me, even though I tell myself that I shouldn't get jealous. Shit. Holy shit, dude. I'm gonna fucking die. I'm gonna suicide. You know how many zeros there are in 30 million. company. Come on, cal.com. We're trying to compare it to that. Oh, gosh. He doesn't know anything. Why do you say that it's a Gemini prompt, it's a Claude Code prompt, or it's a ChatGPT prompt? Prompt is a prompt, right? There is nothing specific about that LLM. Prompt is a prompt. What do you think you're doing? Look at my fucking in Twitter, go sleep. No notifications anymore. It's just went to sleep. Shit. That sucks. What's the premium price now? I think for the December we'll get a discount. I'm definitely wasting my time. Talking about Development. Okay, let's get back. The story of how they funded themselves by making Obama McCain themed breakfast cereal was one single most factor in our decision to fund them. They didn't realize it at that time, but what seemed to be to them an irrelevant story is in fact fabulously good evidence that their qualities are as founders. If showed, they were resourceful and determined and could work together. So they were resourceful and determined and could work together. What wasn't just a serial story was that showed up, though the whole interview showed that they cared. They weren't just doing this for the money because startups were cool. The reason they were working so hard at this company is because it was their project. They had discovered an interesting new idea and they just couldn't let it go. Mundane as it sounds, that's the most powerful motivator of all. Not just in startups, but most of the ambitious undertakings. To be genuinely interested in what you're building. This is what really drives billionaires, or at least the ones who become billionaires from starting companies. The company is their project. One thing only few realize is about the billionaires is that all of them could have stopped sooner, for real. They could have gotten acquired or found someone else to run the company. Many founders do. The ones who become really rich are the ones who keep working. And what makes them keep working is not just money. What keeps them working is the same thing that keeps everyone else working when they could stop if they wanted to. And that there is nothing they'd rather do. This is such a good point. He repeated it a lot of times in his essays, right? I heard this before too. Let me see where it is. See, there are two paper. Here it is. Let's go for that. Here it is again. Same sentence used twice. I fucking knew it. They could have gotten acquired or found someone else to run the company. Many founders do. The ones who become really rich are the ones who keep working. That is not exploiting people by defining the quality of people who become billionaires from starting companies. So that's what YC looks for in founders: authenticity. People's motives for starting startups are usually mixed. They're usually doing it from some combination of desire to make money, the desire to seem cool, genuine interest in the problem, and unwillingness to work for someone else. The last two are more powerful motivators than the first two. It's okay for the founders to want to make money or to seem cool. Most do. But if the founders seem like they are doing just to make money or just to seem cool, they're not likely to succeed on a big scale. The founders who are doing it for the money will take the first sufficiently large acquisition offer, and the ones who are doing it to seem cool will rapidly discover that there are much less painful ways of seeming cool. I like this. Y Combinator certainly sees founders whose MO is motto. I don't know what it is. Motto is to exploit people. YC is a magnet for them because they won YC. They won the YC brand. But when YC partners detect someone like that, they reject them. If bad people made good founders, the YC would face a moral dilemma. Fortunately, they don't, because bad people make bad founders. This exploitative type of founder is not going to succeed on a large scale, and in fact, probably won't even succeed on small scale, because they're always going on taking shortcuts. They see YC itself as a shortcut. Their exploitation usually begins with their own co-founders, which as disastrous. Since the co-founders relationship is the foundation of the company, then it moves on to the users, which is also disastrous because the sort of early adopters a successful startup wants is its initial users are the hardest to fool. The best kind of the founder can hope for is to keep the edifice of deception tottering along until some acquirer can be tricked into buying. But that kind of acquisition is never really big. If professional billionaire scouts know what exploiting people is not a skill to look for, why do some politicians think that this is the defining quality of billionaires? I think they start from feeling that it's wrong that one person could have so much more money than another. It's understandable where the feeling comes from. It's in our DNA and even in the DNA of other species. If they did limit themselves saying that it made them feel bad when person has so much more money than other, who would disagree? If it makes me feel bad too, that I think most people who make a lot of money have more moral obligation to use it for common good. The mistake they make is to jump from feeling bad that some people are much richer than others to the conclusion that there are no legitimate way to make very large amount of money. Now we are getting into statements that are not only falsifiable but false. There are certainly some people who become rich by doing bad things, but there are also plenty of people who behave badly and don't make much money from it. There is no correlation, in fact. Probably an inverse correlation between how badly you behave and how much money you make. The greatest danger is the nonsense. The greatest danger of this nonsense may not even be that it sends policy astray, but that it misleads ambitious people. Can you imagine a better way to destroy social mobility than by telling poor kids that the way to get rich is by exploiting people, while rich kids know from what having watched the preceding generation do it, how it's really done. I'll tell you how it's really done so you can at least tell your own kids the truth. It's all about users. The most reliable way to become a billionaire is to start a company that grows fast. And the way to grow fast is to make what users want. Newly started startups have no choice but to delight users, and they'll never get rolling. But this never stops after being lodestar, and bigger companies take their eye off of their peril, stop delighting users, and eventually someone else will. Users are what partners want to know about the YC interviews. What I want to know about when I talk to founders that we founded in 10 years ago and who are billionaires now, what do users want? How, what new things could you build for them? Founders would have Founders who have become billionaires are always eager to talk about the topic. That's how they became billionaires. Cool. Airbnbs. Shall we read this? What's the time? Yeah, it's 2. Yeah, that's been 1.5 hours. We can read this. How to think for yourself. Thinking different from your peers. This is huge. All your work. Modeling a wealth tax. The 4 quadrants of conformism. Orthodox privilege. Coronavirus and credibility. How to write usefully. Being a noob. And these are some good people, good articles. I really gonna read them. Fashionable problems. Oh my god, these are really getting me so excited. I still want to read. To celebrate Airbnb's IPO and to help future founders, I thought it might be useful to explain what was special about Airbnb. What was special about Airbnbs was how earnest they were. They did nothing halfway. They could sense this even in an interview. In the interview, sometimes after we interviewed a startup, we'd be uncertain what to do and have to ask it over. Other times we just look into one another and smile. The Airbnb's interview was that kind. We didn't even like the idea that much, nor did users. At that stage, they had no growth, but the founders seemed so full of energy that was impossible to not like them. That first impression was not misleading. During the batch, our nickname for Brian Chesky was the Tasmanian Devil because, like the cartoon character, he seemed like a tornado of energy. All 3 of them were like that. No one ever worked harder during YC than Airbnbs did. When you talk to the Airbnbs, they took notes. If you suggested an idea, one of them to them in the office hours, the next time you talk to them, they'd not only have implemented it, but also implemented 2 new ideas they had in the process. They probably have the best attitude of any startup. we founded, I wrote to Mike Arrington during the batch. They're still like that. Jessica and I had dinner with Brian in the summer of 2018, just the three of us. By this point, the company is at 10 years old. He took a page of notes about ideas for new things Airbnb could do. What we didn't realize when we first met Brian and Joe and Nate was that Airbnb was on its last legs. After working on this company for a year and not getting no growth, they'd get agreed to give it one last chance. They'd try this Y Combinator thing, and if the company still didn't take off, they'd give up. Any normal person would have given up already. They had been funding the company with credit cards. They had a binder full of credit cards. They'd maxed out. Investors didn't think much of the idea. One investor they met in a cafe walked out in the middle of the meeting with them. They thought he was going to the bathroom, but he never came back. He didn't even finish his smoothie, Brian said. And now in late 2008, it was the worst recession in decades. The stock market was in free fall and wouldn't hit bottom for another 4 months. Why hadn't they given up? This is a useful question to ask. People, like matter, reveal their nature under extreme conditions. One thing that's clear is that they weren't doing this for the sake of money. As money-making scheme, this was pretty lousy. A year's work, and all they had to show for it was a binder full of maxed out credit cards. So why were they still working on this startup? Because of the experience they had as the first hosts. When they first tried renting out airbeds on their floor during the design convention, all they were hoping was to make enough money to pay the rent that month. But something surprising happened. They enjoyed having those 3 guests staying with them, and the guests enjoyed it too. Both they and the guests had done it because they were in the sense of forced to. Yet they'd all had great experience. It's hard to pronounce these things, like short forms. Yet they'd all stayed. Okay, I think I did good in that. It was better. Yet they'd all stayed. Yet they all had a great experience. Clearly, there was something new here. For hosts, a new way to make money that had literally been right under their noses, and for guests, a new way to travel that was in many ways better than hotels. That experience was why Airbnbs didn't give up. They knew they'd discovered something. They'd seen a glimpse of the future, and they couldn't let it go. They knew that once people tried staying in what is now called an Airbnb, they would also realize that this was the future. But only if they tried it. They weren't. That was the problem during the Y Combinator to get growth started. Airbnb's goal during the YC was to reach what we call ramen profitability, which means making enough money that the company can pay the founders living expenses. If they live on ramen noodles, ramen profitability is not obviously the end of the goal of any startup, but it's the most important threshold on the way, because this is the point where you're airborne. This is the point where you no longer need investors' permission to continue existing. For Airbnbs, ramen profitability was $4,000 a month and $3,500 for rent, $500 for food. They tapped this goal to the mirror in the bathroom of their apartment. The way to get growth started in something like Airbnb is to focus on hottest subset of the market. If you can get growth started in there, it will spread to the rest. When I asked the Airbnbs where there was most demand, they knew from searches New York City. So they focused on New York. They went there in person to visit their hosts and help them make their listings more attractive. The big part of this was better pictures. So Joe and Brian rented a professional camera, took pictures and of the host places themselves. This didn't just make listings better, it also taught them about their hosts. When they came back from the first trip to New York, they asked what they noticed about the hosts that surprised them. And they said that the biggest surprise was how many hosts were in the same position they had been. They needed this money to pay their rent. This was remember the worst recession in decades, and it had hit New York first. It definitely added to the Airbnb's sense of mission to feel that people needed them. In late January 2009, about 3 weeks of Y Combinator, their efforts started to show results, and their numbers crept upward. But it was hard to say for sure whether it was a growth or just random fluctuation. By February, it was clear that it was real growth. They made $460 in fees in the first week of February, $897 in second, $1,428 in third, and that was it. They were airborne. Brian sent me the email on February 22 announcing that they were ramen profitable and giving the last 3 big numbers. I assume you know what you set yourself up for the next week. I responded. What you know set yourself up for the next week. Brian's reply was 7 words. We are not going to slow down. How to think about yourselves. Okay, we got time. There are some kinds of work that you can't do well without thinking differently from your peers. To be a successful scientist, for example, it's not enough just to be correct. Your ideas have to be both correct and novel. You can't publish papers saying things that other people already know. You need to say things that no one else has realized yet. Same is true for investors. It's not enough for a public market investor to predict correctly how a company will do. A lot of other people make the same prediction and the stock price will already reflect it. And there is no room in them to make market. The only valuable insights are the ones most other investors don't share. You see this pattern with startup founders too. You don't want to start a startup to do something that everybody agrees is a good idea. There are already other companies doing it. You have to do something that sounds to most people like a bad idea. But that, isn't why, like writing software for a tiny computer used to by a few thousand hobbies, or starting a site to let people rent airbeds on strangers' floors. Ditto for essays. An essay that told people things they already know would be boring. You have to tell them something new. But this pattern isn't universal. In fact, it doesn't hold for most kinds of work. In most kinds of work, it has to be an administrator, for example. All you need is first half. All you need is to be right. It's not essential that everyone else be wrong. There is a room for a little novelty in most kinds of work, but in practice, there is fairly sharp distinction between the kinds of work where it's essential to be independent-minded and the kinds where it's not. I wish someone had told me about this distinction when I was a kid, because it's one of the most important things to think about when you're deciding what kind of work you want to do. Do you want to do the kind of work where you can win by thinking differently from everybody else? I suspect most people unconscious mind will answer that question before their conscious mind has a chance to. And I know my mind does. independent mindedness seems to be more of a matter of nature than nurture. Which means if you pick wrong type of work, you're going to be unhappy. If you're naturally independent minded, you're going to find yourself frustrating to be a middle manager. And if you're naturally conventional minded, if you're naturally conventional minded, you're going to be sailing into the headwind if you try to do original research. One difficulty here though is that people are often mistaken for about what they fall on the spectrum from conventional to independent minded. Conventional minded people don't like to think of themselves as conventional minded, and in any case, it genuinely feels that to them as if they make up their own minds about everything. It's just a coincidence that their beliefs are identical to their peers, and independent minded, meanwhile, are often unaware how different their ideas are from conventional ones, at least till they state them publicly. By the time they reach adulthood, most people know roughly how smart they are, in the narrow sense of ability to solve preset problems, because they're constantly being tested and ranked according to it. But schools generally ignore independent mindedness, except to the extent they try to suppress it. So we don't get anything like that, like the same kind of feedback about how independent minded we are. There may be a phenomenon where Dunning-Kruger at work, where most conventional minded people are confident that they're independent minded, while genuinely independent minded people worry that they might not be independent minded enough. Look at this shit. Crazy. Oh my god. So being independent minded and having novel ideas is very important. Being able to think differently from others is a great thing, right? So there are two kinds of people. There are conventional minded people who actually think like the crowd, and there are independent minded people who actually think differently, independently, right? And there are people in the conventional minded field who think they're actually independent minded, but somehow others are actually having the same idea as they are. Maybe they are stealing his ideas, right? Everybody has felt like that, I think, because I did feel like that a lot of times. And then there are independent people who think that their idea isn't independent enough, right? Let's go. This is also new. What is it called? Having novel ideas is really great sign. Thinking differently from everybody else can be and work by being a scientist. Where your ideas have to be both correct and novel. You can't publish papers saying the same thing that everybody does. Same with startup founders, right? You don't want to start a startup to do something that everybody agrees is a good idea. But there will be other companies doing it. You have to do something that sounds to most people like a bad idea, but you know that it isn't. Like writing software for a tiny computer used by thousands of hobbyists, or starting a site to let people rent their earbuds on strangers' floors. Ditto essays. Ditto for essays. An essay that told people things they already knew would be boring. It doesn't hold for most of the work, most kinds of the work, but the difficulty here is though that people are often mistaken about where they fall on the spectrum from conventional to independent minded. Conventional minded people don't like to think of themselves as conventional minded. And in any case, it genuinely feels to them that if they make up their own minds about everything, it's just a coincidence that their beliefs are identical to peers, and the independent minded people, meanwhile, are often unaware unaware how different their ideas are from the conventional ones, at least till they state them publicly. Alright. Can you make yourself more independent minded? I think so. This quality may be largely inborn, but there seem to be always ways to magnify it, or at least to not to suppress it. One of the most effective techniques is one practiced unintentionally by most nerds, simply to be less aware what conventional beliefs are. It's hard to be conformist if you don't know what you're supposed to be conformed to. Though again, it may be that such people already are independent minded, and the conventional minded person would probably feel anxious about not knowing what other people thought and make more effort to find it out. It matters a lot who you surround yourself with. If you're surrounded by some conventional minded people, it will constrain you which ideas you can express, and that in turn will constrain which ideas to have. But if you surround yourself with independent minded people, you will have the opposite experience. Hearing what others say about other people say surprising things will encourage you to think of them more. Because the independent minded find it uncomfortable to be surrounded by conventional minded people. So true. They tend to self segregate once they have a chance to. The problem with high school is that they haven't yet had a chance to. Plus, high school tends to be an inward looking little world whose inhabitants lack confidence, both of which magnifies the forces of conformism. So high school is often a bad time to be for the independent minded. But there is some advantage even here. It teaches you what to avoid. If you later find yourself in a situation that makes you think, this is like high school, you know you should get out. Another place where the independent minded or conventional minded are thrown together is successful startups. The founders and early employees are almost always independent minded, otherwise, the startup wouldn't be successful. But conventional minded people are greatly outnumber independent minded ones. So, as the companies grow, the original spirit of independent mindedness is inevitably diluted. This causes all kinds of problems behind the obvious one that the company starts to suck. One of the strangest is that the founders find themselves able to speak more freely with founders of the other companies than with their own employees. Fortunately, you don't have to spend all your time with independent minded people. It's enough to have one or two you can talk regularly. And once you find them, they are usually as eager to talk as you are. They need you too. Although universities no longer have this kind of monopoly, they used to have on education. Good universities are still an excellent way to meet independent minded people. Most students will be most students will still be conventional minded, but you'll at least find clumps of independent minded ones rather than near zero you may have found in high school. It also works to go into the other direction, as well as cultivating small collection of independent minded friends to try to meet as many as different types of people as you can. It will decrease the influence of your immediate peers if you have several of other groups of peers. Plus, if you are part of several different worlds, you can often import ideas from one to another. But by different types of people, I don't mean demographically different. This is so good. I don't have friends at all. If I have to, I should just get friends from different fields and have different groups, right? For this technique to work, you have to think differently. So while it's an excellent idea to go and visit other countries, you can probably find people who think differently right around the corner. When I meet someone who knows a lot about something unusual, which includes practically everyone if you dig deep enough, I try to learn what they know that other people don't. There are almost always surprises here. It's a good way to make conversation when you meet strangers, but I don't do it to make conversation. I really want to know. You can expand the source of influences in time as well as space. By reading history, when I read history, I do it not just to learn what happened, but to try to get inside the heads of people who lived in the past. How did things look to them? How hard? This is hard to do, but worth the effort. For same reason, it's worth traveling far to triangulate a point. Nice. Holy shit, somebody is watching me. Siri. Well, I don't care. You can expand the source of influences in time as well as space by reading history. When I read history, I do it not just to learn what happened, but to try to get inside the heads of people who lived in the past. Okay, this is good. You can also take more explicit measures to prevent yourself from automatically adopting conventional opinions, and most general is to cultivate an attitude of skepticism. When you hear someone say something, stop and ask yourself, is that true? Don't say it out loud. I'm not suggesting that you impose on everyone who talks to you the burden of provoking what they say, but rather that you take upon yourself the burden of evaluating what they say. Treat it like a puzzle. You know that some accepted ideas will later turn out to be wrong. See if you can guess it which. The end goal is not to find flaws in the things you are told, but to find the new ideas that had been concealed by the broken ones. So this game should be exciting quest for novelty, not a boring protocol for intellectual hygiene, and you will be surprised when you're asking, is this true? How often the answer is not immediately an yes. If you have any imagination, you're more likely to have too many leads to follow them than too few. More generally, your goal should be not to let anything in your head unexamined, and things don't always enter your head in the form of statements. Some of the most powerful influences are implicit. How do you even notice this? By standing back and watching how other people get their ideas. Cool. When you stand back at a sufficient distance, you can see ideas spreading through groups of people like waves. The most obvious are in the fashion. You notice a few people wearing a certain kind of shirt, and then more and more, until half of the people around you are wearing the same shirt. You may not care much what you wear, but there are intellectual fashions too, and you definitely don't want to participate in those. Not just because you want sovereignty over your own thoughts, but because unfashionable ideas are disproportionately likely to lead somewhere interesting. The best place to find undiscovered ideas is where no one else is looking. To go beyond this general advice, we need to look into internal structure of independent mindedness. Okay. At the individual muscles we need to exercise, as it were, it seems to me that it has three components: fastidiousness about truth, resistance to being told what to think, and curiosity. Fastidiousness about truth means more than just not believing things that are false. It means being careful about a degree of beliefs. For most people, degree of belief rushes unexamined towards extremes. The unlikely becomes impossible and the probable becomes certain. The independent minded, this seems unpardonably sloppy. They're willing to have anything in their heads, from highly speculative hypothesis to apparent tautologies. What the fuck? But on subjects they care about, everything has to be labeled with a carefully considered degree of belief. Three components: fastidiousness about truth, resistance to being told what to think, and curiosity. So, curiosity is obvious. If you want to know new things, you'll be having curiosity. Resistance to being told what to think. So, people give you how to think. So, just resist from that and think the way you want to think, right? The unique way you actually think about things. And then there is fastidiousness about truth. What the fuck? I can't pronounce that. More than just believing things that are false, not believing in things that are false. Okay, it means the being careful about a degree of belief. For some people, for most people, degree of belief rushes unexamined towards the extremes. The unlikely becomes impossible and the probable becomes certain. To the independent minded, this seems unpardonably sloppy. They're willing to have anything in their head, from highly speculative hypotheses to apparent tautologies, but on the subjects they care about. Everything has to be labeled with carefully considered degree of beliefs. So, this is it. Degree of beliefs. So, how much can you trust that? So, if there is any statements, there is a possibility that it can be true. Like there can be a possibility of 10% that it can be true and 90% for that it can be a false thing, right? You should know that instead of just saying that it's certainly a false thing or it's certainly a true thing. Because even if you have a 10% chance of being possible or probable, it means it will lead you to a place where most people won't go, right? Looking at the thing, most of the people will think that it's false anyway, so they don't look there. Once you start looking there, you can find novel ideas, right? So effectively, to be independent minded, you need 3 things. 1, know the degree of belief. Curiosity. And third one is to care what others tell you to think. This is nothing is binary. Every statement usually has a person being right and a percentage for being wrong. If you have biases to completely flat them out to either be true or false, you will lose an opportunity to look into the ones which are having 10% true possible, because it's as false in your head. But if you gave it a chance and looked into it, you might discover novel ideas, because nobody is looking. Independent minded thus have horror of ideologies which require one to accept a whole collection of beliefs at once and treat them as articles of faith. To an independent minded person, that would seem revolting, just as it would seem to someone fastidious about food to take a bite of a submarine sandwich filled with large variety of ingredients to indeterminate age and provenance. Oh my gosh, this is really hard to understand. Bro, why do you have to use so much of complexity in your essays? Come on. Really? You're old ass. Anyways, any luck? Completely dead. Completely dead. Perfecto. I hate it that it's dead. Crazy system. Related to my system, every spike wants the same machine. Every life is the same algorithm. Every click inside the same Telegram channel, and you don't even realize it. This is not social media marketing. This is engineered attention warfare. Brands still pay for reach. Operators own it. Emotions, angle, closure. That's programming sequence. It hijacks curiosity, reframes conflict, and closes the loop with a soft click CDA that prints money quietly. Caption tail, check checklist. Full checklist in the channel link in the bio. Today's script drops inside the channel. One line of the text equals 1000 coined actions. TikTok to Telegram to offer stack. 25% CTR, 3% CBR, 75%, 75 sales for million views. I don't scale content, I scale control. The algorithm rewards quantitatively. I weaponized it. 5,000 slideshows a day. I built to trigger even one emotion: fear, desire, relief, curiosity. Every post you think is an random data tested psychological architecture. You call it content, I call it mass behavioral conditioning with an affiliate link. You don't need followers, you need infrastructure. You don't need fame, you need leverage. The average creator chases validation, the operator manufactures it. I build the machine that runs the algorithm, which everyone else argues about it. Controls the eyes, controls the money, controls the narrative. It's crazy. This is crazy good. Oh man, this is so good. This is so good. This is so good. Really. Timeless. This is so good. Is it free? That's surprising. I didn't check it. I mean, people should pay for this. It's an AI thing though. Yeah, look at it. Unlimited words per week. Prioritize feature requests per week. It's billed in a month, right? $30 a month. That's really expensive. Really expensive. Instead, just change this unlimited, put some credits, lower your pricing, offer multiple tires. That will work. Is there no video, demo video? That will be fun. Fine, but manifesto. This is good actually. I like it. This is for work, this is not for everyday users. This is for work. We can't be asking users to do this. This is for work. B2B is the way. I got a notification from home. Yes. My gosh. And you still didn't. Okay, I got 6 likes. It's working. Minor curiosity, right? Let's go. You can't be independent minded if it's not enough just to have resistance to being told what you think. It's not enough just to have resistance to being told what you think. Those kind of people reject conventional ideas only to replace them with most random conspiracy theories. Since these conspiracy theories have been manufactured to capture them, they end up being less independent minded than ordinary people because they are subject to much more exacting master than mere convention. Can you increase your fastidiousness about truth? I would think so. In my experience, merely thinking about something you're fastidious about, what the fuck, man? Fastidious about causes fastidiousness to grow. If so, this is one of those rare virtues we can have more merely by wanting it. If it's like other forms of fastidiousness, man, I can't fucking do this. It should also be possible to encourage in children. I certainly got a strong dose of it from my father. The second component of independent mindedness, resistance to being told what to think, is the most visible of three. But even this is often misunderstood. Big mistake people make about it is to think of it of a mere negative quality. The language we use reinforces that idea. You are unconventional. You don't care what other people think. But it's not just a kind of immunity. In most independent minded people, the desire not to be told what to think is positive force. It's not mere skepticism, but skepticism. I've heard of it so much. This is doubt is the truth of something. Theory that certain knowledge is impossible. A theory that I feel like it's very skeptical. That means it feels wrong. Okay. But an action delight in ideas that subvert the conventional wisdom, and the more counterintuitive the better. Some of the most novel ideas seemed at the time the most people like practical jokes. Think how often your reaction to a novel idea is to laugh. I don't think because its novel ideas are funny per se, but it's because novelty and humor share a certain kind of surprisingness. But it's not identical. The two are close enough that there is definite correlation between having sense of humor and being independent minded, just as there is between humorless and being conventional minded. Oh my god, I can't get off my mind out of that, you know, typeless. This is so good. This is really good. I like it. I hope they get funding. Maybe I'll write Notion documents for now with that. And speaking anyway, right? Let's see how it works. I need to hide this shit for a second. People are really interested in it. That's a lot of time to get. Cool. All right. That is sad. I think I should get back to work. Yeah, I should. Or whatever this is. I'll continue the rest tomorrow. Not today. I'll just finish it off. I would think so. In my experience, merely thinking about something you're fastidious. The second component of independent mindedness, resistance, is being told what to think. And the most visible of three, this is all done. Some of the more novel ideas seem to be timed like a practical jokes. You don't care. Convention, you don't care about I don't think we can significantly increase our resistance to being told what to think. It seems the most innate of these three components of independent mindedness. People who have this quality as adults usually show two visible signs, all two visible signs of it as children. But if we can't increase our resistance to be told what to think, we can at least shore it up by surrounding ourselves with independent minded people. The third component of independent mindedness is curiosity. May the most interesting to extend what we can give a brief answer to the question of where the novel ideas come from. It's curiosity. That's what people are feeling before having them. In my experience, independent mindedness and curiosity predict one another perfectly. Everyone I know who is independent minded is deeply curious, and everyone I know who is conventional minded isn't. Except curiosity, children. Wait. I should actually create people, I think. I'll just. I watch your brother. hate to see these things work because people really work so hard to get, you know, like a minute part of this thing. Let's see what he got. Pages, right? Why do you put this image? Except curiosity, all small children are curious. Perhaps the reason is that even the conventional minded have to be curious in the beginning in order to learn what conventions are, whereas independent people are like gluttons of curiosity who keep eating even when they're full. The three components of independent mindedness work in concert: fast-headedness about truth and resistance to be told what they think in your spring curiosity finds new ideas to fill it. Interestingly, the three components can substitute for one another in much in the same way muscles can. If you're sufficiently fastidious about truth, you don't need to be as resistant of being told what you think, because fastidiousness will only create sufficient gaps in your knowledge. Either one can compensate for curiosity, because if you have enough space in your brain, your discomfort are resulting like, what the fuck, man, or curiosity can compensate for them. If you are sufficiently curious, you don't need to clear space in the brain, because the new ideas you discover will push you out of conventional ones and acquired by default. Okay, because the component of independent mindedness are so interchangeable, you can have them on varying degrees and still get the same result. So there is not a just single model of independence. Some people are independent. Oh my gosh. Is there a way to cultivate curiosity? To start with, you want to avoid situations that suppress it. How much does the work you're currently doing engage your curiosity? If the answer is not much, maybe you should change something. The most important active step you need to take to cultivate your curiosity is probably to seek out the topics that engage it. Few adults are equally curious about everything and don't seem as if they can as if you can choose which topics interest you. So it's up to you to find them or invent them if necessary. Another way to increase your curiosity is to indulge it by investigating things you are interested in. Curiosity is unlike most other appetites. In this respect, indulging it tends to increase rather than sate it. Questions lead to more questions. Curiosity seems to be more individual than fastidious about the truth or resistance to be told what to think. To a degree, people have the latter too. They're usually pretty general, whereas different people that can be curious about very different things. So perhaps curiosity is the compass here. Perhaps if your goal is to discover new ideas, the motto should not be do what you love, but do what you are curious about. Cool. All right, let's end it